My parents called my wedding an embarrassment, but they didn't expect this twist. They thought my love was beneath me, my wedding a disgrace. But when the truth came out, the shame wasn't mine, it was theirs. When Emma Carter, the daughter of a wealthy and prestigious family, chooses to marry Liam, a man from a working-class background, her parents brand her wedding as a humiliating embarrassment. Behind closed doors, they plot to ruin her marriage and correct her mistake. But Emma has secrets of her own. With a quiet strength and a plan years in the making, she turns their cruelty into the very weapon that brings them down. This is a gripping tale of betrayal, family pride, and a wedding that became the stage for ultimate revenge. Emma Carter had always been the kind of daughter other parents envied. From her earliest years, she had been the pride of the Carter family, a symbol of grace, intelligence, and refinement. She was the girl who excelled in school, the one who graduated top of her class at Yale, the one who carried herself with the elegance her mother had painstakingly cultivated through etiquette classes, charity balls, and carefully chosen friendships. To outsiders, Emma's life seemed perfect. She was the Carter family, jewel born into wealth, raised in privilege, destined to marry into an even greater fortune. Margaret Carter often bragged at society luncheons that her daughter would marry a senator, or at the very least a billionaire's heir. Charles Carter, a real estate magnate whose empire spanned across New York and Boston, always nodded approvingly. Emma was the one who would carry their name forward with dignity. But Emma's heart had never followed the script. Her parents wrote for her. She had met Liam Walker 2 years earlier in the most unexpected way. On a cold November morning, Emma's car had broken down on a rural road outside Hartford. Stranded in her designer coat and heels, she had pulled out her phone only to discover there was no signal. That was when Liam, covered in grease and carrying a wrench, had appeared. He had been working in his uncle's garage down the road and had noticed her car. "You look like you could use some help," he had said, flashing a smile that was both kind and unpretentious. Emma had expected him to be rough around the edges, perhaps even intimidating. But Liam had surprised her. He fixed her car without a word of complaint, refused payment, and instead offered her a cup of coffee from a thermos he carried in his truck. It wasn't the coffee that captured her. It was his quiet confidence, his laugh that reached his eyes, and the way he seemed to treat her not as a Carter, but simply as Emma. What began as gratitude turned into friendship, and friendship became late-night conversations, shared dreams, and eventually, love. But Emma knew her parents would never approve. Liam was everything they despised. He was from a working-class family, a man who owned a small auto repair shop and prided himself on building something with his own 2 hands. To the Carters, that meant no pedigree, no lineage, no elite connections, no fortune. When Emma finally introduced him at a Carter family dinner, the silence had been deafening. Margaret had looked him over as though he were something scraped from the bottom of her shoe. "So, you fix cars?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "Yes, ma'am," Liam replied calmly, unfazed. "I own my shop. It's small, but I built it myself. Keeps me honest." Charles had scoffed. "Honest doesn't buy douses." Emma had clenched Liam's hand under the table, furious at their arrogance, but Liam had only squeezed back gently, his quiet strength speaking louder than any words. That night, Margaret confronted Emma in her bedroom. "You cannot possibly be serious about this. This man, Emma, you're a Carter. Our family's reputation is everything." "I'm serious, Mother," Emma had replied firmly. "I love him." Margaret's voice had dropped to a hiss. "Love doesn't last. Legacy does. Do you want to throw away everything for some mechanic?" Emma didn't answer, because she knew the truth. Yes, she would throw it all away for him. The months that followed were a battlefield. The Carters tried everything to dissuade her lavish parties where eligible bachelors just happened to be invited, promises of trust funds and property if she ended things, even cruel ultimatums. But Emma refused to bend. When Liam proposed to her in the quiet glow of his workshop, no diamond, just a simple silver band he had polished himself, Fema said yes without hesitation. It wasn't the size of the ring that mattered, but the sincerity in his eyes. When she broke the news to her parents, their reaction was explosive. "You're humiliating us," Charles thundered, slamming his fist on the dining table. "Do you know what people will say when they hear that Emma Carter, of all people, is marrying a grease monkey?" Margaret's eyes were cold as steel. "This wedding will be a disaster. You'll regret it." Emma met their fury with a calmness that surprised even herself. "Then don't come," she said. "But I won't change my mind." As the wedding approached, Emma felt the weight of their disapproval pressing on her. Relatives whispered, family, friends sent back declined invitations, and her parents stopped speaking to her altogether. But Liam's family embraced her warmly. His mother, a nurse who had raised 3 children alone after her husband died, welcomed Emma with open arms. His younger sister braided flowers into Emma's hair during the bridal shower. For the first time in her life, Emma felt loved, not for her last name, but for herself. Still, she couldn't shake the gnawing dread of what her parents might do on the big day. Margaret and Charles were proud, calculating people. If they chose to show up, it wouldn't be out of love, it would be to assert control, to make a statement. Emma's heart ached at the thought. She had once dreamed of her father walking her down the aisle. Now, she wondered if he would show up only to spit on her happiness. But even as the storm brewed, Emma held on to one truth. She loved Liam, and nothing her parents did could take that away. The morning of her wedding dawned bright and crisp. Emma slipped into her simple ivory dress, her heart pounding with anticipation. Her bridesmaids, Liam's sister, and her own childhood best friend helped her adjust the veil. In the mirror, she saw not a Carter heir, not a socialite, but a woman ready to choose her own path. "This is your day," her best friend whispered. "Don't let them take it from you." Emma nodded, but deep inside, she knew, if her parents came, there would be war. And war had always been her parents' favorite game. The little white chapel stood tucked between rolling hills and a line of oak trees that had been there for more than a century. It wasn't the kind of grand cathedral Emma's parents had always imagined for her wedding. There were no crystal chandeliers, no marble floors imported from Italy, no string quartet flown in from Vienna. Instead, there were wildflowers handpicked by Liam's sister, ribbons tied around pews, and the faint smell of fresh pine wood from the handmade altar Liam had built with his own hands. To Emma, it was perfect. The guests filled the modest chapel, mostly Liam's family, Emma's few loyal friends, and a handful of distant relatives who had dared to defy Margaret and Charles Carter's unspoken threats. The air buzzed with anticipation, but also with a tension that Emma could feel deep in her bones. Because they had come. Her parents had arrived. Emma spotted them from behind the curtain of the bride's preparation room. Charles in his tailored black suit, Margaret in her pearl-white dress that looked more expensive than the chapel itself. They didn't smile. They didn't greet anyone warmly. They carried themselves like royalty visiting a foreign land here, only to be seen, not to participate. Emma's chest tightened, but she drew in a steady breath. "This is my day," she reminded herself, "not theirs." The ceremony began with music. From an old piano Liam's cousin played softly. Guests turned their heads as the doors opened, and Emma stepped down the aisle, her veil glowing in the filtered sunlight that poured through the stained glass windows. Every eye was on her. She should have felt nervous, but she didn't. Not when she saw Liam waiting at the altar, his brown eyes warm, his smile steady. Her best friend squeezed her arm, whispering, "You're glowing." Emma walked forward slowly, not with her father by her side but with her own strength carrying her. It hurt, yes, every step was a reminder that Charles had refused to walk her down the aisle. But she refused to let that pain drown her. When she reached the altar, Liam took her hands, and the minister began to speak. It should have been beautiful. It should have been the moment she'd dreamed of, but her parents could not let it be. As the minister spoke about love being patient and kind, Charles leaned over in his pew and muttered loud enough for those around him to hear, "Patience won't fix a broken-down garage." Several guests glanced uncomfortably in his direction. Emma's stomach tightened, but she squeezed Liam's hand. Liam gave her a small nod, silently telling her, "Don't let them win." But Margaret wasn't finished. When the minister spoke of love enduring through all things, Margaret's voice cut sharply through the chapel. "Endure. Let's see how long she endures living without the family money." The whisper wasn't just a whisper this time. It echoed. Several gasps rippled through the pews. Emma's cheeks flushed with heat. For a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of their cruelty. But Liam steadied her, his thumb brushing over her palm. "Eyes on me," he whispered. "Not them." She did. The vows continued, but the whispers and scoffs from the Carters poisoned the air. At one point, Charles even chuckled when Liam spoke his promise to provide for Emma. Provide? Charles scoffed loudly. With what? Spare change from oil changes. A murmur of disapproval rose from the guests, but Charles didn't care. He leaned back smugly, certain he had proven his point that this wedding was a farce, that Emma was humiliating herself. But to Emma, something shifted in that moment. The humiliation wasn't hers, it was theirs. Their cruelty was on full display, their arrogance stripped bare for everyone to see. They had come to destroy her day, but instead they revealed themselves petty, bitter, and graceless. When it was Emma's turn to speak her vows, her voice trembled at first, but then she steadied herself, holding Liam's gaze. "I vow," she said clearly, "to love you without conditions, without pride, without shame. Because what we have isn't built on money, or power, or appearances. It's built on truth, and truth will always outlast lies." The words weren't just for Liam, they were aimed directly at Margaret and Charles. Gasps rippled again through the crowd, but this time they were followed by applause. Guests began to clap, not caring that it broke tradition. Emma smiled through tears. Margaret's face turned pale with fury. Charles tightened his jaw, but neither spoke again. When the minister finally declared them husband and wife, Emma and Liam kissed, and the room erupted in cheers. The chapel shook with joy, feet, clapping hands, laughter, and tears. Emma felt like she was flying. For the first time, she truly belonged to herself. Not to the Carter name, but even as she basked in that joy, she caught sight of her parents leaving the chapel early, their faces twisted with disgust. They hadn't stayed for the reception, they hadn't hugged her, they hadn't wished her happiness. No, they left behind a storm. The reception was held in a small community hall decorated with fairy lights and mason jars filled with flowers. There was barbecue, homemade pies, and laughter spilling into the night. Liam's cousins danced barefoot, his mother hugged everyone who walked through the door, and Emma laughed until her stomach ached. But when she slipped away for a breath of air, she overheard voices in the parking lot. Her parents. "You've humiliated us, Margaret," Charles snapped. "All those people, hearing our daughter pledge her life to him. This will follow us everywhere." Margaret's voice was venom. "We'll fix it. She'll come crawling back when she realizes what poverty feels like. And when she does, we'll make sure she understands the price of betrayal." Emma's heart froze. They weren't done with her. They weren't walking away. They were plotting. She returned to the reception, forcing a smile as she clung to Liam's arm. But inside, her resolve hardened. Her parents had made one thing clear. They would never accept her happiness. They would try to poison it, to tear it apart. And if they wanted war, Emma would give it to them. But not yet. Not here. She would wait. She would plan. And when the time came, they would never see her coming. The honeymoon glow didn't last long. Emma and Liam settled into a small two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Hartford. It wasn't the kind of mansion Emma grew up in, but it was cozy, full of warmth, and most importantly, they painted the walls together, filled the shelves with books and photographs, and laughed as they argued over where the couch should go. For a while, Emma let herself believe that love was enough, that they could build their own life, free from the shadows of the Carter name. But her parents had other plans. The first strike came quietly. Emma had worked for years at a prestigious marketing firm in New York, a job she'd earned through her skills, but also, admittedly, through her family's name. She had returned from her honeymoon, ready to continue her work only to be called into her boss's office. "I'm sorry, Emma," her boss said, not meeting her eyes. "We've had complaints, concerns. We think it's best if we part ways." Emma's chest tightened. "Complaints? From who?" The silence was her answer. Later that day, she discovered the truth. Her father had personally called the CEO of the company, pressuring them to fire her. He told them that Emma had shamed the Carter family and should no longer represent their brand. She walked out of the office humiliated, her career destroyed overnight. The second strike came harder. Liam had been working tirelessly at his garage, expanding his customer base, saving for new equipment. One morning, he arrived to find a notice pinned to his door. His business license was under review due to anonymous complaints of unsafe practices. Anonymous. But Emma knew exactly who was behind it. The investigation shut down his shop for 3 weeks, customers drifted away, income evaporated, and Liam was forced to dip into their savings just to keep afloat. Emma watched the man she loved, usually so steady and optimistic, begin to wear down under the pressure. She tried to reassure him, but she could see the questions in his eyes. Why is this happening? How much more can we take? The third strike was personal. Whispers spread through Hartford's upper circles. Liam was a gold digger. He had trapped Emma for money. He was planning to divorce her once he got access to her trust fund. Emma confronted her mother one afternoon when Margaret happened to be shopping at the same boutique. "You're spreading lies," Emma said coldly. Margaret smirked, adjusting her pearl necklace. "Lies or warnings? People deserve to know what kind of man you married. He's beneath you, Emma, and when this little fantasy falls apart, don't expect us to pick up the pieces." Emma's fists clenched so tightly her nails cut into her palms, but she didn't give her mother the satisfaction of seeing her break. At night, Emma lay awake beside Liam, staring at the ceiling. The weight of it all pressed on her chest like a stone. She could feel the cracks forming in their world, the way her parents' poison seeped into every corner of their lives. But what hurt most wasn't the sabotage, it was the realization that her parents weren't just trying to ruin Liam, they were trying to ruin her. One evening, after another exhausting day, Liam finally spoke the words Emma feared he'd been holding back. "Maybe they're right," he said quietly. "Maybe you deserve someone better. Someone who can give you the kind of life you're used to." Emma turned to him, her heart aching at the doubt in his voice. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare let them win." He looked at her, eyes full of pain. "I just don't want you to regret choosing me." Emma cupped his face in her hands. "The only thing I'll ever regret is letting them take you away from me, Liam. I chose you, and I'll keep choosing you every day." He kissed her forehead, and for a moment, the storm outside faded. But Emma knew storms didn't simply fade. They grew. Weeks turned into months, and the attacks didn't stop. Her parents froze her out of the family accounts, cut her off from her inheritance, and instructed family friends not to speak to her. At social gatherings, she became a ghost. Poor Emma Carter, the girl who threw her life away for love. Emma tried to hold her head high, but inside, anger boiled. Why should she have to beg for dignity? Why should she accept being treated like an embarrassment when she had done nothing wrong? For the first time in her life, Emma began to see her parents clearly, not as powerful, untouchable figures, but as cruel tyrants who ruled by fear and manipulation. And she realized something else. Something that startled her. She wasn't powerless. Emma had always been smarter than her parents gave her credit for. While they saw her as a dutiful daughter meant to play society's games, Emma had quietly observed. She had learned. She knew their world inside and out, how their real estate empire operated, who their allies were, what secrets they kept locked away, and she had secrets of her own. She remembered nights when her father had drunk too much and bragged about deals that nobody needed to know about. She remembered hearing whispers of shell companies, offshore accounts, and falsified documents. At the time, she had ignored it, convincing herself it wasn't her problem. But now, it was a weapon. The breaking point came on a rainy November night. Emma and Liam returned home to find their front door vandalized with spray paint. "Gold digger." Liam froze, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched. Emma stared at the dripping red letters, her stomach twisting with rage. "This was them," she whispered. "I know it." Liam didn't answer. He just walked inside silently, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Emma stayed outside, rain soaking her dress, eyes burning with fury. Her parents had declared war. Fine, she would fight back. That night, Emma sat at the kitchen table long after Liam had gone to bed. She pulled out her old laptop and began to dig through old emails, financial statements she had once glimpsed, files she had copied during her internship at her father's firm. Piece by piece, a picture began to form. Fraud, bribery, tax evasion. Her parents weren't the powerful elite they pretended to be. They were criminals hiding behind a polished name. And Emma realized something chilling. If she played her cards right, she could destroy them. She closed the laptop, her hands trembling, from fear, but from something new. Resolved. Her parents had tried to sabotage her marriage, her career, her reputation. They had called her wedding an embarrassment, her love a disgrace. But they had underestimated her. Emma Carter wasn't broken. She was awake. And now, the war had truly begun. Emma had always been a Carter in name, but now she realized she no longer had to live like one. The family she came from thrived on secrets, manipulation, and appearances, but Emma, cast out and branded a disappointment, no longer had anything to lose. And when you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous. She began her plan quietly. On the surface, Emma lived the life of a young newlywed. She baked pies with Liam's mother on Sundays, went grocery shopping in sweatpants like any ordinary woman, and supported Liam as he slowly rebuilt his business after the false complaints. But behind the scenes, Emma worked tirelessly. She created folders and digital love, every scrap of evidence she could find. Old tax forms she'd once filed for her father, bank statements left carelessly in drawers, emails she had quietly forwarded to herself during her internship at Carter Holdings, names of shell corporations her father had mentioned in drunken rants. Each piece on its own was harmless, but together they painted a damning picture. Charles Carter was no mere businessman. He was laundering money through offshore accounts, bribing inspectors for property approvals, and evading millions in taxes. Margaret wasn't innocent either. She had been using Carter Holdings charity funds to bankroll her lavish personal spending, masking designer gowns and jewelry as donations. The empire her parents flaunted wasn't built on power. It was built on lies. And Emma knew exactly how to bring it down. But revenge wasn't simple. She couldn't just march into a courtroom with her evidence. Her parents were too powerful, too well-connected. A single misstep would mean discredit, lawsuits, or worse. So Emma played the long game. She reached out to an old college friend, Sarah Mitchell, who now worked as an investigative journalist. In New York, they met in a quiet coffee shop. Emma with a folder tucked under her arm. Sarah raised an eyebrow when she saw Emma. "It's been years. What's going on?" Emma slid the folder across the table. "I need you to look into this, quietly. If I'm right, it could be the biggest story of your career." Sarah opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents. As the minutes passed, her expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "Emma, if this is real, your parents could go to prison." Emma's voice was steady. "It's real, and they deserve worse." Sarah hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this? This is your family." Emma's jaw tightened. "They stopped being my family the day they tried to ruin my life. Now I'm just returning the favor." Sarah agreed to investigate, promising to cross-reference the information and dig deeper. Emma left the coffee shop with her heart pounding. For the first time, she felt like she had control, but control required patience. She returned to her daily life, smiling at Liam, cooking dinners, pretending to be fine. She didn't tell him everything yet. She wanted to shield him until her plan was fully ready. In the meantime, she played her role as the obedient daughter. One Sunday, Emma attended a Carter family luncheon. Margaret had insisted, framing it as an attempt at reconciliation. Emma knew better. The gathering was held at the Carter mansion. With its marble floors gleaming under chandeliers, the air perfumed with roses imported from France. Margaret wore her pearls, Charles's custom suit, both of them radiating superiority. Emma, arrived alone, wasn't welcome, of course. "Emma," Margaret said coolly, kissing the air near her daughter's cheek, "so glad you could finally join us. We were beginning to think you'd abandoned your family." Emma smiled sweetly, hiding the storm inside her. "Of course not, Mother. I'd never abandon you." It was a lie, but a useful one. Throughout the luncheon, she endured the veiled insults. "You look tired, darling. Marriage must be draining. Still living in that little house. How quaint. No word yet on finding a real job, I suppose." Emma smiled through every jab, nodding politely, sipping her wine. On the surface, she looked like the dutiful daughter trying to make amends, but inside, she was memorizing everything: her father's careless remarks about a new investment, her mother's mention of a donation she planned to claim as a tax write-off. Every detail was another crack in their armor. By the end of the luncheon, Margaret and Charles were smug, believing they had cowed her back into submission. They didn't realize Emma was using their arrogance as rope to hang them. That night, Emma sat on her bed with her laptop, updating Sarah on what she'd learned. Sarah's investigation was gaining traction. She had already found offshore accounts linked to Carter Holdings, as well as property deeds under fake names. "This is bigger than I thought," Sarah said over the phone. "If we release this, it'll explode. But we need absolute proof." "I'll get it," Emma promised. And she meant it. Weeks passed, and Emma perfected her double life. By day, she played the meek daughter, attending occasional Carter events, pretending to regret her marriage. By night, she worked with Sarah, compiling documents, connecting dots, building a case strong enough to shatter the Carter name. But revenge wasn't only about evidence, it was about timing. Emma wanted her parents to feel secure, to believe they had one. She wanted them smug and careless, so the fall would be harder, and she wanted their downfall to happen publicly. Not in some quiet courtroom, not in sealed legal files, no. Emma wanted the world to watch the Carters burn. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. Margaret and Charles were planning their annual Carter Foundation Gala, the crown jewel of their social calendar. Every year, they invited politicians, CEOs, celebrities, the crème de la crème of society. It was their chance to flaunt their wealth and power under the guise of charity. Emma attended the planning dinner, listening quietly as her mother bragged about the guest list. Senators, CEOs, foreign investors. It will be the event of the season, Margaret said, her smile sharp. And this year, darling, perhaps you'll behave. No embarrassing outbursts. Emma smiled demurely. Of course, mother, but inside, her mind was already spinning. The gala was the perfect stage. The lights, the cameras, the reporters, all of society watching. If the truth were to come out, then there would be no hiding, no controlling the narrative. The Carters' reputation would crumble in front of their peers. It would be poetic. That night, Emma told Sarah her plan. The gala, Emma said, that's when we drop it. Not before, not after, right there, while the whole world is watching. Sarah hesitated. Emma, if we do this, there's no going back. They'll know it was you. Emma's eyes hardened. Good. Still, Emma knew she had to prepare for the fallout. The Carters were ruthless, and when cornered, they would strike back. So she quietly met with a lawyer recommended by Sarah, handing over copies of her evidence for safekeeping. She arranged for documents to be sent to federal investigators on the night of the gala, ensuring her parents couldn't bury the story. Every move was calculated. Every step was deliberate. Emma was no longer just reacting to her parents' cruelty. She was orchestrating their ruin. One evening, as she and Liam sat on their porch watching the sunset, he turned to her with a soft smile. You've been different lately, he said. Stronger, like something's changed. Emma looked at him, her chest tightening with love and guilt. She hadn't told him the full truth yet, not because she didn't trust him, but because she wanted to protect him until it was done. I just realized, she said softly, that I'm done letting people control my life. It's time I take it back. Liam kissed her hand. Whatever happens, Emma, I'm with you. Always. She leaned against him, closing her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but soon, the Carters would fall, and when they did, Emma would finally be free. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across Emma's apartment as she sat hunched over a stack of files. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside, Emma's world was consumed by the quiet storm she had been building for years. Her pen scratched against a legal pad, lines of notes filling the page. For most of her life, Emma had played the dutiful daughter. She attended the prep schools her parents chose, wore the dresses her mother approved, and smiled at every debutante ball as if she belonged to their gilded cage. She had perfected the art of silence, listening, observing, storing away secrets. In the corners of her mind, her father, Charles Carter, ran his financial empire with an iron fist. To outsiders, he was the picture of respectability, generous donations to charities, polished interviews in glossy magazines, and a mansion that glowed like a beacon of success. But Emma knew better. She had seen the late-night phone calls, the encrypted files he kept hidden in a locked cabinet, the sudden disappearances of funds that never matched the paper trail. It wasn't just greed. It was rot, hidden beneath the Carter name. Emma had never thought she would use what she knew. Despite the coldness of her parents, some part of her still craved their love. She thought maybe, just maybe, they would one day look at her and see more than a pawn. But the wedding changed everything. The public humiliation, the whispered insults, the way her father laughed at Liam's vows, carved something out of her heart and left only steel behind. That night, after guests had gone home and the cheap champagne had lost its fizz, Emma lay awake beside Liam, staring at the ceiling. He had held her hand, whispering that they'd get through it, and as he drifted into sleep, Emma had whispered back, not to him, but to herself, never again. The quiet collection of secret Seema began to dig. She visited her parents' estate under the guise of weekend brunches, smiling politely while her father boasted about deals and her mother critiqued her dress. But while they poured wine and prattled about society events, Emma excused herself, slipping into her father's office with a camera hidden in her handbag. Bank statements, offshore accounts, shell companies in the Caymans, She photographed everything. She remembered one night vividly. Her father had left his laptop open, and Emma, with trembling hands, plugged in a small USB drive Liam had given her. A minute later, she had copies of years' worth of financial records. When she slipped back into the dining room, her father was laughing at a joke one of his friends told. He didn't even notice she had been gone. Her mother was no better. Margaret Carter played the role of a society queen, but Emma had intercepted emails showing her mother's backroom dealings, kickbacks from real estate developers, payoffs to cover scandals, a trail of bribery that stretched like cracks across the Carter family's polished facade. Each discovery was a knife Emma could tuck away for later. Liam's concerned Emma. Liam said one evening, as she spread documents across their kitchen table, "You've been at this for weeks. What are you doing with all of this?" Emma looked up at him, her eyes tired but burning with focus. "They tried to destroy us, Liam. They took my inheritance. They've ruined your name. They've made our marriage into a joke. I won't let them win." He placed his hands on hers, steady and warm. "I don't care about their money or their approval. I care about you. If this is eating you alive, it's not." She cut him off sharply, then softened her tone. "It's keeping me alive. All those years I thought I was powerless in their world, but I'm not. I know their secrets, Liam, and secrets are power." Liam searched her face, conflicted. He loved her strength, but he also feared the fire that now consumed her. Still, he nodded. "Just promise me you won't lose yourself in this." Emma kissed him gently, but her mind was already racing ahead. The journalist Emma reached out to an old college friend, Clara Jennings, now an investigative journalist for a New York paper. Clara had always been relentless, chasing stories others were too afraid to touch. Over coffee in a dim Brooklyn cafe, Emma slid a manila envelope across the table. Clara raised an eyebrow. "This looks serious." "It is," Emma replied. "Fraud, laundering, tax evasion. The Carters have built their empire on lies." Clara's fingers hovered over the folder. "Emma, this is your family. Once this goes public, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" Emma didn't hesitate. "They called my wedding an embarrassment, Clara, but they're the real disgrace. I'm done protecting them." Clara studied her for a long moment, then opened the envelope. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page. "If this checks out, Emma, it won't just be a scandal. It'll be the end of them." "That's the point," Emma said coldly. A dangerous game weeks turned into months. Emma worked in shadows, meeting Clara in secret, passing along files piece by piece. Together, they built a case strong enough to bring down the Carter name. But Emma knew her parents were not fools. Charles Carter, especially, had a nose for betrayal. He began asking questions. Why was Emma visiting so often? Why was her smile a little too polite? One evening, as Emma walked through the family estate's marble hall, her father's voice cut through the silence. "Emma." She froze. He stood in the doorway of his office, his silhouette dark against the warm glow inside. "You've been spending a lot of time here," he said, his tone casual but sharp beneath the surface. "I trust you're not snooping around where you shouldn't." Emma forced a smile. "Just enjoying home." "Father, isn't that what you wanted?" He studied her, eyes narrowing. Then, with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes, he said, "Good, because in this family, loyalty is everything, and betrayal is something we don't forgive." Emma walked away, heart pounding. She knew he suspected. The clock was ticking. The final piece, Clara called one night, excitement crackling in her voice. "Emma, we have it. The offshore accounts, the paper trail, the emails. This is airtight. If we release this, your parents are done." Emma closed her eyes, a rush of relief flooding her chest, but also something darker. "This isn't just about destroying them, Clara," she said softly. "It's about freedom, for me, for Liam, for anyone who ever thought they could never stand against people like my parents." Clara hesitated. "When do you want me to run it?" Emma opened her eyes. They were cold now, sharper than steel. "Not yet," she said. "I want them to see me first. I want them to know exactly who ended them." Seeds take root. The stage was set. The secrets gathered. The Carter family's empire, once unshakable, now rested on a foundation of sand. As Emma stood at her apartment window, watching the city lights flicker like stars, she whispered to herself. Still, Emma knew she had to prepare for the fallout. The Carters were ruthless, and when cornered, They would strike back, so she quietly met with a lawyer recommended by Sarah, handing over copies of her evidence for safekeeping. She arranged for documents to be sent to federal investigators on the night of the gala, ensuring her parents couldn't bury the story. Every move was calculated. Every step was deliberate. Emma was no longer just reacting to her parents' cruelty. She was orchestrating their ruin. One evening, as she and Liam sat on their porch watching the sunset, he turned to her with a soft smile. "You've been different lately," he said. "Stronger, like something's changed." Emma looked at him, her chest tightening with love and guilt. She hadn't told him the full truth yet, not because she didn't trust him, but because she wanted to protect him until it was done. "I just realized," she said softly, "that I'm done letting people control my life. It's time I take it back." Liam kissed her hand. "Whatever happens, Emma, I'm with you. Always." She leaned against him, closing her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but soon, the Carters would fall, and when they did, Emma would finally be free. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across Emma's apartment as she sat hunched over a stack of files. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside, Emma's world was consumed by the quiet storm she had been building for years. Her pen scratched against a legal pad, lines of notes filling the page. For most of her life, Emma had played the dutiful daughter. She attended the prep schools her parents chose, wore the dresses her mother approved, and smiled at every debutante ball as if she belonged to their gilded cage. She had perfected the art of silence, listening, observing, storing away secrets in the corners of her mind. Her father, Charles Carter, ran his financial empire with an iron fist. To outsiders, he was the picture of respectability, generous donations to charities, polished interviews in glossy magazines, and a mansion that glowed like a beacon of success. But Emma knew better. She had seen the late-night phone calls, the encrypted files he kept hidden in a locked cabinet, the sudden disappearances of funds that never matched the paper trail. It wasn't just greed. It was rot, hidden beneath the Carter name. Emma had never thought she would use what she knew. Despite the coldness of her parents, some part of her still craved their love. She thought maybe, just maybe, they would one. They look at her and see more than a pawn. But the wedding changed everything. The public humiliation, the whispered insults, the way her father laughed at Liam's vows. It carved something out of her heart and left only steel behind. That night, after guests had gone home and the cheap champagne had lost its fizz, Emma lay awake beside Liam, staring at the ceiling. He had held her hand, whispering that they'd get through it. And as he drifted into sleep, Emma had whispered back, not to him, but to herself, never again. The quiet collection of secrets Emma began to dig. She visited her parents' estate under the guise of weekend brunches, smiling politely while her father boasted about deals and her mother critiqued her dress. But while they poured wine and prattled about society events, Emma excused herself, slipping into her father's office with a camera hidden in her handbag. Bank statements, offshore accounts, shell companies in the Caymans. She photographed everything. She remembered one night vividly. Her father had left his laptop open, and Emma, with trembling hands, plugged in a small USB drive Liam had given her. A minute later, she had copies of years' worth of financial records. When she slipped back into the dining room, her father was laughing at a joke one of his friends told. He didn't even notice she had been gone. Her mother was no better. Margaret Carter played the role of a society queen, but Emma had intercepted emails showing her mother's backroom dealings, kickbacks from real estate developers, payoffs to cover scandals, a trail of bribery that stretched like cracks across the Carter family's polished facade. Each discovery was a knife Emma could tuck away for later. "Liam's concern, Emma," Liam said one evening, as she spread documents across their kitchen table. "You've been at this for weeks. What are you doing with all of this?" Emma looked up at him, her eyes tired but burning with focus. "They tried to destroy us, Liam. They took my inheritance. They've ruined your name. They've made our marriage into a joke. I won't let them win." He placed his hands on hers, steady and warm. "I don't care about their money or their approval. I care about you. If this is eating you alive—" "It's not," she cut him off sharply, then softened her tone. "It's keeping me alive. All those years I thought I was powerless in their world, but I'm not. I know their secrets, Liam, and secrets are power." Liam searched her face, conflicted. He loved her strength, but he also feared the fire that now consumed her. Still, he nodded. "Just Promise me you won't lose yourself in this. Emma kissed him gently, but her mind was already racing ahead. The journalist Emma reached out to an old college friend, Clara Jennings, now an investigative journalist for a New York paper. Clara had always been relentless, chasing stories others were too afraid to touch. Over coffee, in a dim Brooklyn cafe, Emma slid a manila envelope across the table. Clara raised an eyebrow. This looks serious. It is, Emma replied. Fraud, laundering, tax evasion. The Carters have built their empire on lies. Clara's fingers hovered over the folder. Emma, this is your family. Once this goes public, there's no going back. Are you ready for that? Emma didn't hesitate. They called my wedding an embarrassment, Clara, but they're the real disgrace. I'm done protecting them. Clara studied her for a long moment, then opened the envelope. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page. If this checks out, Emma, it won't just be a scandal. It'll be the end of them. That's the point, Emma said coldly. A dangerous game. Weeks turned into months. Emma worked in shadows, meeting Clara in secret, passing along files piece by piece. Together, they built a case strong enough to bring down the Carter name. But Emma knew her parents were not fools. Charles Carter, especially, had a nose for betrayal. He began asking questions. Why was Emma visiting so often? Why was her smile a little too polite? One evening, as Emma walked through the family estate's marble hall, her father's voice cut through the silence. Emma, she froze. He stood in the doorway of his office, his silhouette dark against the warm glow inside. You've been spending a lot of time here, he said, his tone casual but sharp beneath the surface. I trust you're not snooping around where you shouldn't. Emma forced a smile. Just enjoying home. Father, isn't that what you wanted? He studied her, eyes narrowing. Then, with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes, he said, good. Because in this family, loyalty is everything. And betrayal is something we don't forgive. Emma walked away, heart pounding. She knew he suspected. The clock was ticking. The final piece. Clara called one night, excitement crackling in her voice. Emma, we have it. The offshore accounts, the paper trail, the emails. This is airtight. If we release this, your parents are done. Emma closed her eyes, a rush of relief flooding her chest. But also something darker. This isn't just about destroying them, Clara, she said softly. It's about freedom. For me, for Liam, for anyone who ever thought they could never stand against people like my parents. Clara hesitated. When do you want me to run it? Emma opened her eyes. They were cold now, sharper than steel. Not yet, she said. I want them to see me first. I want them to know exactly who ended them. Seeds take root. The stage was set. The secrets gathered. The Carter family's empire, once unshakable, now rested on a foundation of sand. As Emma stood at her apartment window, watching the city lights flicker like stars, she whispered to herself. Margaret and Charles moved among them like royalty, every gesture rehearsed. Emma knew the truth, how much of their empire had been built on fraud, offshore accounts, and political bribes. For years, she had collected fragments of that truth, hidden away like puzzle pieces in encrypted files. Tonight, the puzzle was nearly complete. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A single text from her journalist friend, Maya Rodriguez. Evidence delivered. Tomorrow morning headlines will drop. IRS already notified. Showtime. Emma's heart raced. She slipped the phone back and forced herself to sip champagne, maintaining composure. The gala pressed on with speeches. Charles stood at the podium, chest puffed with pride, boasting of honor and legacy. His voice carried over the room, his words rehearsed 1,000 times. Emma watched the crowd lap it up, unaware of the storm building just beyond those walls. As he spoke, Emma noticed the smallest crack, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple despite the cool air. He glanced at his phone twice. Mid-speech, Margaret, sitting at the head table, had the faintest crease between her brows. They knew, maybe not everything, not yet, but some whisper had reached them. Perhaps a leak, perhaps one of their allies sensing betrayal. Either way, the cracks in their armor were showing. After the speeches, Emma made her way through the crowd, Liam at her side. Every encounter felt like a battle. Old family friends asked with thinly veiled disdain. So, Emma, how's life outside the estate? Still adjusting to simpler things? Emma smiled sweetly each time. Life is good, real, not built on appearances. Her words made some pause. Others quickly changed the subject. At one point, Margaret cornered her in the powder room. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume. Her mother's eyes, cold and sharp, locked onto Emma's reflection in the mirror. "What are you playing at?" Margaret hissed. "You think you can waltz in here, flaunting your little rebellion, and embarrass us?" Emma turned slowly, meeting her gaze. "Embarrassment? You haven't seen anything yet." Margaret's face blanched. "What did you do?" Emma smiled faintly, lips curling with quiet defiance. "I stopped pretending." She brushed past her mother, leaving her to stew in the unanswered questions. Later in the night, as music swelled and couples danced, Liam pulled Emma close. "You're sure about this?" he whispered into her hair. Emma rested her head against his chest. "I've never been more sure of anything. They took my wedding day from me, tried to ruin my marriage. They called us an embarrassment. But tonight, Liam, the mask comes off. And when it does, they'll finally see themselves for what they are." Liam's arms tightened around her. "Then, I'll be right here when it happens." Emma exhaled. For years, she had carried the weight of her parents' shadow. Tonight, she was about to set it down, no matter the cost. The gala glittered on, laughter echoing through the grand halls. But beneath the music and lights, the cracks were spreading. By morning, the empire her parents had built would be bleeding in the headlines. And, for the first time in her life, Emma felt powerful. The morning after the gala, Boston woke to chaos. Headlines screamed across every major news outlet: Carter empire built on lies, IRS investigation underway, political donors linked to Carter money laundering, senators' allies scramble as family scandal breaks by breakfast. The mansion that once symbolized untouchable wealth was swarmed with reporters, camera crews, and protesters demanding justice. Drones circled overhead, capturing footage of Margaret closing the heavy oak doors with trembling hands. But Emma wasn't at the mansion. She was at her small kitchen table with Liam, sipping coffee as sunlight streamed through the modest curtains. Her phone buzzed, nonstop messages from friends, old classmates, even distant relatives. Some were shocked, others gleeful. Emma ignored them all. She only watched the live news feed. When Charles Carter appeared on camera outside his mansion, shouting, "This is slander," while the IRS carried boxes of documents to waiting vans, Emma almost laughed. It was surreal. Her father, the man who had once mocked Liam's oil-stained hands, now powerless against flashing cameras and handcuffs waiting just off screen. Liam reached over, squeezing her hand. "This is it, Emma. You did it." Her throat tightened. "We did it." The Carters fall. By noon, both Charles and Margaret were summoned for questioning. Their lawyer, a man who had grown rich defending the elite, looked pale and defeated as he escorted them past the press. Reporters shouted, "Mr. Carter, did you hide money offshore? Mrs. Carter, did you funnel funds into political campaigns illegally? Is it true your daughter exposed you?" That last question struck like lightning. Margaret's icy facade cracked on live TV. She turned sharply, her voice shrill. "My daughter has nothing to do with this." But the seed had been planted. By evening, #Emma Carter was trending nationwide. People called her the heiress who turned rebel, the woman brave enough to dismantle her corrupt dynasty from within. Emma sat on her couch, curled against Liam, watching it all unfold. It wasn't about fame, it was about justice. For every time her parents called her an embarrassment, for every time they mocked Liam, for every time they tried to own her life, this was her answer. The twist that night, as the news cycle raged, Emma received an unexpected call. It wasn't from a reporter or an old friend. It was from her parents' closest ally, Senator Donovan. "Emma." His deep voice rolled through the receiver, smooth and calculating. "I'll be frank, you've stirred a hornet's nest. But you've also done something remarkable." Emma frowned. "What do you want?" "You've proven you're not just another spoiled Carter child. You have guts. Strategy. The way you timed this just before the election's brilliant. You might have destroyed your parents, but you've also carved yourself a position of power, if you want it." Emma froze. Power. The word echoed in her head. For years her parents had used power as a weapon. Was Donovan suggesting she step into their world, not as their puppet but as a player of her own? Liam noticed her expression, concern flickering in his eyes. Emma ended the call quickly, brushing it off. But the thought lingered. The showdown too. Days later, Emma walked into the courthouse. Her parents were there for their first hearing. Margaret's perfect hair was dull, her face pale. Charles looked older, diminished, his suit wrinkled. When their eyes met, Emma's fury and betrayal burned in their gaze. Margaret whispered sharply as she passed. You did this to us. Emma leaned close, her voice calm, and raised her sharp. No, you did this to yourselves. I just stopped covering it up. The bailiff called order. Reporters scribbled every word. The image of Emma standing tall while her parents wilted became iconic. The personal revenge, but the sweetest revenge wasn't in the courtrooms or headlines. It was personal. A week later, Emma and Liam renewed their vows not in some marble cathedral, but in their small backyard. Friends, neighbors, even Maya the journalist were there. Laughter filled the air, simple and genuine. Emma wore a sundress, barefoot in the grass. Liam read his vows with tears in his eyes. There were no chandeliers, no senators, no critics, only love. Emma realized that her parents' worst insult, calling her wedding an embarrassment, had become her greatest weapon. Because in their world, love without wealth, joy without status, was shameful. But in Emma's world, it was freedom, the twist they never expected months later. With the Carters' assets frozen and their influence gone, Emma received another call from Senator Donovan. He wanted her to testify before Congress about political corruption. He hinted at a possible future in public service. Emma stood at her window, phone in hand, staring out at the modest but happy life she'd built. Liam walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Another offer, he asked softly. She nodded. This time, one that could change everything, not just for me, but for others too. Liam kissed her cheek. Then, whatever you choose, I'll be right beside you. Emma smiled faintly. Her revenge had started, as personal, but now, it had the chance to ripple outward, to make sure no one else's life was destroyed by people like her parents. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her parents had tried to make her a pawn in their empire. Instead, she had burned their empire down and built something stronger in its ashes. And that was the twist they never expected. The Carter mansion sat silent now, its windows dark, its once perfect gardens overrun with weeds. Reporters no longer camped outside the story had moved on back to the neighbors. It stood as a monument of disgrace. Emma drove past it one last time. She didn't slow down. She didn't need to. The house wasn't her home, not anymore. Home was the little blue house with the creaky porch swing, where Liam waited with a cup of coffee and the smell of fresh bread. That was her world now. The courtroom finale, months of trials, ended in a thunderstorm of guilty verdicts. Charles Carter was sentenced to federal prison for fraud and money laundering. Margaret, though spared prison time due to cooperation, lost everything: her wealth, her reputation, and the glittering society that had once adored her. When the judge read the verdict, Emma sat in the back, anonymous among the crowd. She didn't gloat, she didn't cry, she simply exhaled, a weight sliding off her chest that she had carried for years. Her parents turned to look for her as they were led away. Emma stood and met their gaze, calm and steady. For the first time in her life, she saw fear in Charles Carter's eyes, and for the first time, Margaret looked small. Emma whispered to herself, "This is justice." The choice but revenge had left Emma with more than just victory. It had left her with power, the kind she never asked for, but now couldn't. Ignored. Senator Donovan wasn't the only one who came calling. Nonprofits, investigative journalists, even grassroots organizations wanted her voice. They called her the whistleblower heiress, a symbol of courage against corruption. One night, Emma sat on the porch with Liam, papers spread across her lap, offers, invitations, speeches to give. "What if I say yes?" she asked quietly. "What if I step into this world, not like them but to undo what people like them have done?" Liam studied her. "Then you'd be risking becoming what you hate." Emma's chest tightened. "Or I'd be proving I'm nothing like them." He reached over, brushing her hair back gently. "Whatever you choose, it has to be for you, not for revenge anymore." That night, Emma didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, caught between two paths: the quiet life she had fought for with Liam, or the storm of public life, carrying the Carter name into a new future. A week later, Emma received a letter from prison. It was from her father. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic. "Emma, you think you've won, but all you've done is destroy your family. You'll regret this. Without power, without wealth, you'll be nothing. And when the world forgets your little rebellion, you'll wish you had chosen differently. You'll come crawling back to the Carter name. Mark my words." Emma folded the letter carefully, then burned it in the kitchen sink. The flames devoured the paper, curling it to ash. Liam walked in, saw what she was doing, and said nothing. He only kissed her temple. That was the moment Emma knew. Her father's words weren't accursed, they were fuel. The legacy 6 months later. Emma Cartonow, Emma Miller, after legally taking Liam's last name, stood in front of a crowded auditorium. Cameras flashed, microphones lined the podium. She wasn't here to sell lies. She wasn't here to protect wealth. She was here to launch a foundation, the Miller Foundation for Accountability, dedicated to exposing corruption in politics and business, funded not by billionaires, but by ordinary people who wanted justice. Her speech was simple, clear, and powerful. I was born into wealth that wasn't earned, into power that wasn't deserved. My parents believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. No one is untouchable. If I learned anything, it's this. Silence protects the corrupt. Speaking out, even when it costs you everything, protects the truth. I stand here not as a Carter but as someone free. The applause was thunderous, the quiet victory afterward. As the crowd dispersed and reporters scrambled to publish their stories, Emma found Liam waiting in the back. He didn't care about the cameras, or the fame, or the noise. He just handed her a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. "You did good," he said simply. Emma smiled, leaning into him. "We did good." They drove home together, past the city lights, past the billboards plastered with her face, back to the little blue house with the creaky porch swing, where the world was quiet and love was loud. Final seniors later, when Emma held her daughter in her arms for the first time, she whispered, softly, "You'll never know the prison of someone else's dreams. You'll never live for someone else's power. You'll grow free. And that's my gift to you." Outside, Liam painted the nursery walls while the swing creaked in the breeze. The Carter name had turned to dust, but Emma's legacy lived on, not in gold, not in marble, not in lies, but in love, in truth, in freedom. That was the ultimate revenge. The end, the heiress's revenge.